So this is still part of the Game a Day challenge I started, but I'm trying a new version of the format. Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and this is Game a Day Challenge, or something like that. That's a terrible name. That's a terrible name, ignore that I said that. This is basically, for the past 3-4 months now, I have been playing a new game every single day. Not every single day, actually, but on average. So if I play 3 today and none the past 2 days, it all lines up. Basic idea is I'm trying to get through a backlog of unplayed games, and to do that, games that have been piling up as I cover reviews, prototypes, all these things, Kickstarters come in, and I've been trying to get my unplayed games back under control. And so for the past several months, I committed to myself that in the year 2022, I would play a new game every single day. No, I don't have 365 new games, but I have enough to start the process and see what happens as I move forward. So, this is basically where we're at. I've played the past 3 months. I've done a full video covering the games I played in January, in February, in March, and now I'm covering the 30 new games that I played in April. This is a slightly different version because in the past videos, I've gone through every single one of the games. The problem is, at the end of those first 3 months, I did a different video, the 169 games I played in the first quarter of 2022, and I liked that video a lot more. It covered both old and new. It was all the unique games I played, and I now plan on doing that every single quarter. I like the idea of 4 times a year going over everything I played the past quarter and just giving you the ranking them in order, like telling you here are the best of the best, at least obviously from my perspective, so it's only really useful information if your tastes align with my own. But to that end, one of the problems is that means there's a lot of duplicate information between these videos and that video. So I wanted to change up this format a bit, and to that end, I'm going to tell you the 30 games I played in April, but then from there I will go ahead, and it's not actually in April, just for the record, many of them were played in March. They're just counting towards April as I try to stay ahead of the curve and make sure to get that game a day in. These are the 30 games that counted for April's criteria, April's tally, and then I'll talk about 10 or so of them that I want to go more into detail on, and the other 20 you'll find out more about when I talk about the games I played this quarter. That ensures a little less overlap. So, 3 minutes into the video, let's go through this. In April, I played the following games. I played Power Rangers Heroes of the Grid. I played the City of Spies, the expansion to the City of Spies. I've never really played and incorporated the expansion to it, so I started using those new abilities. We have Viscounts of the West Kingdom was a new to me game. Marvel Legendary with expansions. I played Marvel Legendary already, but with the expansions, I started adding in all the expansions to do a review of them. You probably already know my opinion if you've watched that review, and if you haven't watched that review, it's probably because you don't care enough to begin with about Marvel Legendary. Me, of course, you care, but I appreciate it. Thank you. We have Jurassic World. I did a full first thoughts on Jurassic World. I need to play it more, but that was one of the games. I have Slash and Spells, a Kickstarter that unfortunately has failed to fund, but I got a chance to play that one. We have Animalia, a little solo trick-taking game. We have Trails, the shorter second version of Parks that then went to Target. We have Modern Art from Reina Knizia. We have Decorum from Floodgate Games. Very interesting game. Did a full review on that one. We have Dice Miner. I got a chance to try that on Sovereignty, which is an online gaming platform. We have Canvas Reflections, the expansion to Canvas. In general, by the way, I count expansions, but I don't count all expansions. That'll make more sense later in this video when we talk about Skulls. We have Quest Kids, the expansion. We have Get On Board, New York and London. We have French Toast, which is a party game, a very interesting party game. We have Panorama, which is a forgettable game. I'm giving opinions now. That's not the point of this over here. We have Micro Macro Crime City, the Full House expansion, which is basically Micro Macro. It's honestly a cheat that I'm counting this here. There's no differences whatsoever. We have Founders of Teotihuacan, Pandemic Fall of Rome, and That Time You Killed Me from Pandasaurus Games, a very interesting abstract game that I need to dive into more. And that is the game. Those are the games we're not going to talk about more. Those will all be in my final roundup at the end of the quarter, along with everything else while I rank everything. The games I'm going to talk about in this video, I believe there's 11 of them, not 10, 11. But let's start off the bat with Nightmare Cathedral. Nightmare Cathedral from Board and Dice Games. It's a game that in general, my process for covering games is pretty simple. Somebody reaches out, says, do you want to cover a game? Or sometimes I reach out as well. Sometimes I'll say, hey, I'd love to cover this game. But if they reach out to me, I look into the game, and I decide if it's a fit for me. Sometimes I was already interested. Sometimes it's a game that I definitely knew I wanted, and I'm so happy they reached out to me. Done. Other times, I don't know enough about it, and I have to look into it. But I always look into it. I take a look at the game, the mechanics in play, the art, the elements, generally the rules, although it's hard. I don't read 60-page rulebooks to decide if to say yes or no. Sometimes I will skim through the rulebook to get a feel for the flow. But it's always a balance, and in the case of Nightmare Cathedral, it was a game I was not interested in. Just because of the art. I wasn't interested initially. And then they reached out to say, can you cover it? And I looked into the mechanisms, and the mechanisms looked intriguing. The idea of improving your tableau of action cards seemed intriguing. Area control is always something I like. And there were enough mechanical similarities that I was like, you know what, this is a game that might be up my alley, and I said yes to it. And I'm very happy I did, because it really, really impressed me. Now, I still don't like the art, I still don't like the theme, and those things, long term, those things might be factors as far as whether it's a game that stays in my collection or not. At the end of the day, I have enough games coming in and going out that I have to make hard choices, and sometimes stupid decisions or stupid aspects that shouldn't matter are enough for me to pick one game over another. But Nightmare Cathedral from Board and Dice really impressed me. The quick actions you take every single round, the way the area control is implemented in a way that feels like a little tight push and pull, the fact that it works well at 2 players, the improving your tableau of actions to make yourself more and more powerful as you go, it had a lot of things that I really liked. It had some aspects that I thought were fiddly or weren't interesting enough, but overall, Nightmare Cathedral gave me a lot of elements that I really enjoyed, that I was impressed. And I want to dive back into it. I want to dive into the final version of the game to try the various nightmares, because once those nightmares start moving around the board in the second half of the game, or second 2/3, depending on how your game goes, the nightmares will start wandering around the board, and those will start having a huge impact on the game state. And you only use 2 nightmares per game, and there's a bunch of different nightmares, which means you have different ways that the nightmares will start destroying things or having huge impacts, devouring various enemy versus units on the board. It's a lot of fun. And I was really impressed by it, despite the fact that it wasn't a game that was on my radar initially. I did a full review of it already, but I wanted to talk about it here again because it hit me out of nowhere. It was a game that had an interesting artist, a whole backstory as far as the art, and I just kind of wrote it off as being an art project more than a board game, but I really liked the board game they had. Then we have Skulls of Sedlec. Sort of. These are the expansions I mentioned. So Skulls of Sedlec in general, the most recent expansion I got was the expansion collection from Kickstarter. Now for this Game a Day challenge, I allow myself the luxury of being able to count playing a game with expansions, but I only allow myself to do it once within a reasonable time frame, meaning Skulls of Sedlec has like 7 little modular expansions, and I've been playing with a bunch of them, and I don't count it more than once. I count the expansions once, and that's it. If I had a new batch of expansions coming in a year, I count that again, but it's basically new content I allow to count once. I don't allow myself to count every single Marvel Champions pack that I try as a new expansion for the sake of this challenge. And by the way, the sake of this challenge, I didn't talk about in this video, but if I don't actually stay ahead of the game, I'll be getting rid of unplayed games to make up for the days I'm behind. So this is like I actually have to do this. Or I could just not do the consequence, but I will do the consequence because I said so, so let's do that. Anyways, going back to Skulls of Sedlec. I love Skulls of Sedlec. It's possibly my smallest game that I rate a 5. Like, if you think in terms, like a 5 out of 5, if you think in terms of the box size, the components, the table space the game takes up, Skulls of Sedlec is likely the smallest package that I will give a 5 out of 5 to. I'd have to check my list, but I'm pretty sure it's the only one, because it's so good at what it's doing. I love the decision space. I love the variable abilities that change the way you approach the cards. The basic idea of Skulls of Sedlec is you're going to be having a bunch of graveyards. You're going to be flipping over cards, then selecting cards and building out your own tableau. Your tableau that scores in different ways depending on the various elements of the cards in play. Each card has 2 aspects, a top and a bottom. And where they go in your pyramid, how they go, with what combinations of other cards, all have different effects in the game. And the base game of Skulls of Sedlec is already solid, but then every expansion you mix in different ways mixes up the experience more and more. And it allows it for more players as well, and it allows you to have a larger pyramid as well, and there are small modifications I've made to the game to allow me to have more expansions incorporated without overly breaking the balance of the game. The problem is if you mix in too many expansions, then you run the risk of not having the cards come out the way you want. So basically we do 9 graveyards, and when you flip over a graveyard, you flip over 3 graveyards. It just means there's more cards in play, so more of a higher chance of you seeing the various options you'll want as you decide to incorporate multiple expansions in. But I love Skulls of Sedlec, and I've yet to play a bad expansion. I haven't played all the expansions yet. I think the expansion collection, if you ignore solo stuff, I think it comes with 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check. But we've played 3 or 4 of them already. There are like 1 or 2 we have not, so I don't know the exact numbers. But we haven't played with all of them. But I love what they add to the game. Each expansion adds a slightly new puzzle. Suddenly you don't want those romantics to be together after all. Suddenly, I can't remember which expansions I've played with, but their expansions all add a different little puzzle to the way you score, because everything is just layering off everything else. This guy wants to be above or below all the priests, and so the way you stack your priests and the way you stack the whatever they're called again, the zealots I think it's called, the way you stack them in your pyramid changes everything. And it's always about trying to min-max your score in the game, how you can get above 50 points or whatever. 50 is a good score, by the way, but if you can get above 50 points, that's a lot of fun to try to play and dive into it again, then add a few new expansions, shuffle them all up, and dive into it again and again and again. Skulls of Sedlec from Button Shy Games is one of my favorite games of all time. I really thoroughly enjoy it, and the expansions have only further added to the variability the experience has, a variability that proved to be a downfall for Sprawlopolis for me. I like Sprawlopolis a lot, but the more I played it, to be fair, I played Sprawlopolis like 50 plus times, but the more I played it, the less variable it felt, and the more I felt like I was repeating the same pattern of optimization with the same goals. Skulls of Sedlec, I'm not there yet. I'm still enjoying it, and the expansions make me enjoy it even more. Museum Pictura. Now, I only have one play under my belt right now, but then again, this isn't a review show. This is a what I played in the month of whatever show. And for the case of Museum Pictura, I got my hands on this one because of the fact that I played Encyclopedia, a prototype, and I loved it. And their prior game was Museum and Museum Pictura. Now, Museum is a game that I wrote off a long time ago based on what I found out about it. I've never played it, and I'm kind of intrigued to play it now, but I also think I shouldn't waste my time because I think Museum Pictura is going to do what Museum does, but better for me. But Museum is set collection, but it seemed from when I looked into it when it's first on Kickstarter, as a backer, trying to decide if I wanted it or not, it seemed like it might be drifting a little bit more on the lighter side, and so I didn't really dive into Museum Pictura. Museum. Then I kind of ignored Museum Pictura because I just wrote it off as an expansion to Museum. When I finally played Encyclopedia and loved it, absolutely adored Encyclopedia, I looked into Museum Pictura more to see, like, should I be getting that one? I looked into both Museum and Museum Pictura, and I found that Museum Pictura was considered to be a slightly more strategic version of Museum. I was like, let me go ahead and try that. Now, I've only played it once, but I really enjoy it. Not like Encyclopedia level enjoy. Encyclopedia hits all my boxes, but in a way that I'm looking forward. I have the expansion, I have some Kickstarter content. I'll be diving into it more, and at some point doing a review on it, I'm sure. But I really like what Museum Pictura is doing. It has some of the same elements of set collection that you find in Encyclopedia. It has some of the same elements of trying to min-max the different opportunities that you have in Encyclopedia. It doesn't do so as well for me. There's a few more restrictions as far as what you can do and how you can do it. And the museums I find, the museums that you're putting cards into, they start getting stale across the course of the game as the cards start drifting out and you start seeing the patterns of what and who needs what and how that's going to play out. I still like it a lot. I like it a bit. Well, not a bit. I like it a lot. I think it's sticking around for a while. Time will tell. Ultimately, Encyclopedia might be the thing that dethrones it. Once I have Encyclopedia, it might just be that, hey, Museum Pictura is not Encyclopedia, and I'd rather play Encyclopedia. I also think the Museum Pictura is a drop more accessible than Encyclopedia, and it might hit the table with some other people that I wouldn't pull out Encyclopedia with. But I really like Museum Pictura. I'm tempted to pick up Museum. I think I have to hold strong and not do so. I think Museum, if this is already a step down from Encyclopedia, but it's still within the realm of what I appreciate in terms of the level of strategy brings to the table, I think that Museum would probably be a step further back, and I'd probably just get rid of it and keep Museum Pictura. I might actually watch a playthrough. I really don't actually watch playthroughs. I'll film playthroughs, but I don't watch playthroughs. I might watch a playthrough of Museum because I think that would give me all the information I need as far as getting a feel for the decision space and whether it's interesting enough to have it or try it or any of those things. And then we have Welcome to the Moon. Welcome to the Moon from Blue Cocker Games. I love this game. I absolutely adore this game. This game is Welcome to the Moon. I've used the word adore like 3 times this video. I should be more careful. Welcome to the Moon is the third game in the Welcome to series. We have Welcome to, we have Welcome to Your Perfect Home, we have Welcome to Las Vegas, and we have Welcome to the Moon. Welcome to the Moon is easily my favorite of the series. It's so good. It basically gives you 8 maps in a single game. The same way Welcome to gave you 1 map, and then there were a bunch of expansions you could add on, but I never felt the expansions mixed up the experience interestingly enough for me. Like, it just felt like the same basic game with small goal changes. I haven't played all of them, but they didn't feel impactful enough for me to care about the expansions. Welcome to Las Vegas felt like a fiddlier version than Welcome to Your Perfect Home. And Welcome to the Moon feels like a beautiful evolution of the series. I'm 5 games in so far, 5 maps in. There's 8 different maps. I want to try all the maps before I officially review it on the channel, but it's so addicting in what Welcome to the Moon is bringing to your table. It gives you the same core formula of what Welcome to is. If you like Welcome to, you most likely will in some way appreciate Welcome to the Moon. I'm not saying you'll like it more than Welcome to or not, but you should definitely dive several maps in. Do not call it a day after the first map. The first map's almost an intro mode, and then subsequent maps mix it up a bit, although sometimes it's a step backwards, but they all give you a different puzzle as far as how you place your numbers, of how you use different resources or cards or symbols or different things, but it's really engaging, and it does so with 8 different games. It's like they had Welcome to, they had Welcome to Las Vegas, and then they had 8 expansions, and they wrapped all those 8 standalone games into a single box. They threw in a bunch of legacy components and cards that you can unlock, and they said, here you go. And they gave it to you at an incredibly reasonable price point considering what's in here. A high recommendation. High recommendation. We have Tenpenny Parks, a game that I really like, really appreciate, and don't know if it will stay. You see, Tenpenny Parks is in the interesting position of, I think the art's amazing, I think the core polyomino puzzle is solid, And I really like the general advertising system and the action selection, the clearing out your parks and all of those things, but I also get all of that from other polyomino games. And other games that I have that do this do so in ways that stand out more. Tenpenny Parks is both a game that I really recommend and think is incredibly solid and is worth paying attention to, worth looking at, and worth seeing if it's a fit for you. It might stay longer than it should because my kids like it. But for right now, Baron Park is still my gold standard in terms of pure polyomino addictive goodness. That's the gold standard for me. We have Planet Unknown incorporates a whole bunch of innovative aspects, including some elements of clearing off your board in a way you might try to do in Tenpenny Parks with the trees that you have over there. Different systems, different limitations, but some degree of small overlap. Then we have the Grand Carnival. The Grand Carnival introduces an interesting element in the way you have to lay the groundwork for your polyominoes and be mindful of the way your guests move through the park. Tenpenny Parks has the guests moving through the park sort of in the way you can't place rides exactly touching one another, but it doesn't have the groundwork element. The groundwork element really makes Grand Carnival stand out more than this one does. Tenpenny Parks is just a well-done implementation of the genre, but it doesn't do anything new for me, and I already have well-done implementations of the genre in the case of Baron Park. If you were playing Baron Park for the first time, or Tenpenny Parks for the first time, I don't know which one you'd like more, and I could equally argue both of them. Meaning I could say that you might just prefer one over the other for one reason or another. For me, Baron Parks has solidified itself in my collection, and the expansion certainly helps, where Tenpenny Parks is really fun, and I enjoy it a lot. And when this video is done, I actually plan on sitting down and playing this one, but I like Tenpenny Parks. I just don't know if it does enough things interesting or different, comparatively speaking. Is it good? Yes. Is it solid? Yes. Can I recommend it? Yes. Am I happy to play it all the time? Absolutely. Would I often find myself picking a different polyomino game for any number of different potential reasons, depending on what I'm looking for at that moment? That's the one I worry about. From there we have the Dark Quarter. The Dark Quarter was a letdown for me, but I don't think it will necessarily be a letdown for you. The Dark Quarter from Lucky Duck Games and Fan Rider Games is a game I was incredibly looking forward to because it was the next iteration of Destinies, and I love Destinies. And this one was supposed to have true solo built in a way that Destinies kind of failed. And that's all true. Except the Dark Quarter felt more like Chronicles of Crime to me than it did like Destinies. And I liked Chronicles of Crime a decent amount, but I didn't love it, whereas I love Destinies. And so I ended up getting a game that I had expectations that were here, and then it felt like a different game that people love, many people love, but I'm not one of those people. I find Chronicles of Crime to be a good game, one that I do not love, but one that I do enjoy. And so it was a big letdown for me, despite the fact that I don't necessarily think it'll be a letdown for you. In fact, if the other reviews, previews, or anything to go by, it was very well received. And I believe that because it felt like a game that is very well received, just not a game that's for me. Chronicles of Crime as a system that is loved, but Chronicles of Crime as a system to me feels like point at your phone, click, point at your phone, click, point at your phone, click again and again and again until you find the pattern. And often it feels like guesswork as much as it does deduction, and all those words I just said could equally be applied to the Dark Quarter. If you didn't like Chronicles of Crime, I would be wary of picking up the Dark Quarter. It was on Kickstarter. Kickstarter's over if you late pledging any of that stuff, or down in the future. If you didn't like Chronicles of Crime, I'd be wary of the Dark Quarter, but if you like Chronicles of Crime, I think the Dark Quarter is likely a good fit for you. But it was a letdown for me. These 11 games, I never said that the 11 games I chose to talk about are going to be 11 games that I love. They're just 11 games that I chose to talk about from these 30 games. And so the Dark Quarter, I want to like it more. The story was excellent. The backstories were excellent, but the backstories were also in a theme I didn't care about. If it was the theme had been different, if it was more medieval, like Destinies is, I like medieval. So sue me, I just like the theme. I don't know. It was a letdown for me personally. Brass Birmingham. Brass Birmingham, I finally dove into this game this year. I've had it in my collection since I first backed the Rocksteady Kickstarters, but I dove into Lancashire first because I had already played the original Brass, so why learn something new when I can play something I already knew, or mostly I already knew. And so to that end, I dove into Brass Lancashire and played that. For years I played that. I heard Brass Birmingham was better. I figured, Cult of the New and all that, because it's probably not better. Why would it be better? It might be better. Maybe it's better. Who really knows? I don't really care. They're so closely rated on Board Game Geek. They're both within the top 50 that it's not like it's that much of an issue, and it hasn't been an issue. I played Brass Lancashire for years and loved it every single time, and every single time I played it, I was like, I should be playing this game more. And eventually this past year, I had a chance to finally sit down and table Birmingham. I figured enough time has gone by. I've had both games sitting next to themselves on the shelf for who knows how long, and I've never really played this game. It's time to table it. And lo and behold, it's better than Brass Lancashire, at least for me. And for many people, the general averages on Board Game Geek would seem to imply that it's better for many people, but it's not that dissimilar. But there are a few small tweaks, and there's elements of Lancashire I'll miss. I did a full video review on these, and I talked about the comparisons of them, and there's elements of Lancashire that I will miss, but not enough so that I care. And definitely not enough to own both. The games are far too similar for that kind of nonsense, says the guy who owns 14 Zombicides. I like Brass Lancashire a lot. But after a few games of Brass Birmingham and Lancashire, and I played them back to back, I made sure, what I made sure to do, because I wanted to, is I didn't just play Birmingham. I played Birmingham, then played Lancashire, then played Birmingham, then played Lancashire. Not in the same day, but in a relatively short time frame. Because I wanted to get a feel for playing them together, and also it's a great game, so I don't mind the excuse. And after doing all that, I was like, Birmingham does it better for me. Small tweaks, small adjustments, a little less randomness. I like the bear. The bear's not that dissimilar than the crates, but it works. I don't know. I like Birmingham better. By a tiny, minute margin, but enough so that I'm keeping Birmingham, and Lancashire is gone. The Quest for El Dorado. The Quest for El Dorado, I finally dove into the expansions for this one. I've had the Quest for El Dorado since roughly a few months after it came out. I've had the expansions for a long time. I've had the Mystery of the Temples. I've had them all. All the stuff that you can expect for the Quest for El Dorado I've had. And I've only played the base game for a long time. I've read the expansion rules several times, actually, but I never dove into them. I don't know why. I think, for me, I treat Quest for El Dorado as almost like a filler game. Like, oh, hey, what do we want to play now? And that often means I'm not prepping for it in a way that I often prep for other games when it's time to play a game, or say, hey, we're going to have to beat people over, what are we doing today? It's often the game we play when we have a little more time between games, when we're waiting for someone else to come over, or when people just happen to have stopped by, which means I'm not prepping for it. Which means playing the expansions has always been pushed off, because I prep for it, and then we don't play it for 6 months, or 2 months, or 3 months, whatever it is, and then by the time it comes around, we're playing it as a filler game, and I haven't reread the rules for the expansion. So it took longer than I would have thought otherwise. But I finally dove into Heroes and Hexes. I have not dove into the Mystery of the Temples, or the Golden Temples, or whatever it's called. I finally played Heroes and Hexes, and I don't imagine I'll ever play base Quest for El Dorado again. Even with new players. It's not so overwhelming for new players what the expansions are adding. It adds heroes, which are great, because the heroes are really absurdly powerful in a way that is incredibly fun. It adds new cards, which new cards are just great. It's not overwhelming, it's just more cards for your marketplace, which is also fun. And then it adds hexes, which are an interesting implementation that is just random enough that I can see it being frustrating. It's not a blanket recommendation on those hexes. It's not. It says I think the hexes are fun. I like them. I like what they add to the game. But we've seen random swings in the hexes in such a way that I'm not confident that the expansion is for everyone. Or you could always play with the heroes and the new cards and ignore the hexes. That's a possibility too. But I really like what the expansion adds. It adds more variability, it adds powerful cards, and it adds a degree of agency or choice as far as how you pop into the hexes, absorb these various these hexes that you'll have, and then teleport around to different locations, taking the benefits and the cons of those locations. It makes me feel more powerful as I play. And that's a big thing for me in games. I like powers and abilities. It doesn't, I mean, you could play longer maps too. A whole bunch of options. I like what Heroes and Hexes does for Quest for El Dorado. We have Almanac the Dragon Road. I really like this one's, nothing on the side. Oh, hey, this side of the box shows the title. I should put that there. Almanac the Dragon Road, Scott Alms and Colossal Games, is one that I finally tabled because Thinker Themer was talking about it. Thinker Themer, great channel. They were talking about the game, and they talked about how much they enjoyed it, and so I finally dove into it. I had a copy, I just hadn't played it yet, and it's a really solid game. Almanac the Dragon Road is basically a worker placement game, a light worker placement game, very, very light, but it's a light worker placement game in which you are traveling from page to page. You finish a page that has some worker placement agency in it, and then with your resources, with your caravan, with all the stuff you've acquired, you choose a new location and you turn the page. It's a choose your own adventure, page to page worker placement game. Each location offers a new puzzle. Each location offers a new economy around the resources you've already collected. And to that end, you're diving into these options, you're trying these new things out, and you're enjoying the process of just simple, accessible worker placement. You're upgrading your caravan, you're gathering new objectives, you're gathering new things you can do. I have a few complaints around it, and I'm curious what the expansions do. The Crystal Peaks, I think, is the new expansion. I'm curious what the expansions add to the game as far as how they mix up the experience. But base game is, meaning as far as how they mix up the experience and possibly improve some elements. Because base game has some complaints I have around how easily you can get caravans, how a player can get locked out in a 4-player game. Players can get locked out of buying new caravans a little too easily. Same with getting new objectives. Sometimes they're a little harder to get your hands on than you would like. And so I have complaints around some potential balance issues, but I just really like it. A core aspect is why I like this game so much is every time we play, as we flip the pages we're not going to, everyone's like, oh no, we can't try that map. I want to try that map. I don't think I've actually tried all the pages yet. There's like 17 different possible worker placements, but you go on different routes. So I've played multiple pages multiple times as I dove into it again and again. I've also, each time I've tried some degree of new pages, but I don't know if I've played all 17 worker placement pages. Because it's not that you're playing a single page as a game. You're playing a sequence, a journey of 5 or 6 pages as you go through the experience. The start, the end, the 4 in the middle, and the end can be one of 2 really. The start's always the same. I really like Almanac, the Dragon Road. It is a new twist on worker placement, a twist I'd love to see applied to heavier games and heavier systems. If this is what they did with a light game, I can't imagine how cool or interesting or innovative this could be when applied to a much heavier project at the same time. It's a solid game that is really, it's not that great as far as mechanics. It's good as far as mechanics, but it makes you enjoy the process in a way that is very appealing. And lastly, and speaking of Thinker Theme, I didn't think of this, we have Luna. Luna's a game I actually played with Thinker Theme. I played it at Gamma, ran into them, and played Luna from Stefan Feld, which is great because I always like being able to check off another Stefan Feld game. He's one of my favorite designers. I've liked almost everything he's done. I recall not particularly enjoying Aquasphere quite as much as other games that he's done, but I mostly like his games. They don't always stay. Sometimes I keep this one and get rid of that one, but I like almost everything Stefan Feld has designed, and Luna is no exception. Although it's no exception in both cases. It's a game that I'm not keeping. I don't feel the need to seek it out because I feel other designs of his do it in a way that's more satisfying. Luna has an interesting puzzle as far as how you have your various characters, your various, I can't remember what they're called, priests or something, and there are all these islands around the board, and you're taking actions at the islands, but all these actions can give you these different puzzles, and you're trying to figure out how you can get these extra bonus tokens to move your people around to different islands, to take advantage of different options, to start building buildings on the islands to get more efficient actions, to start getting your priests into the center temples, to put them onto the tokens over there, to be mindful of the books that will lock you in place. There's a whole interesting interweaving puzzle mechanism as far as the people that are traveling around the islands, penalizing you or giving extra points, or where you can build that round. Everything in Luna is an optimization puzzle. It feels like a Stefan Feld game, and more importantly, it feels like the Oracle of Delphi. In a very different way. Or it might be the Oracle of Delphi, I never know. And it feels very different, but very similar. I don't have a firm line, because if I try to compare them point to point, it feels more different than it does similar, but playing both those games gives me a similar feeling, and I love the Oracle of Delphi, and I really, really liked Luna. Luna was another Stefan Feld game, a beautiful production from TMG. I played the deluxified version, absolutely over-the-top, beautiful production. Very, very impressed with the game, with the production, all good things. And I'm happy that I own the Oracle of Delphi. I'm happy that I'll be able to play that, and I don't feel the need to dive into Luna again. It was a really solid game, like most Stefan Feld games, but a really solid game that I'll only ever have played once. And those are the 30 games I've played in April. Those are the 30 games, 11 that we talked about a bit more in detail, 19 that we'll save for future videos or content or games leaving the collection or reviews in the case of some of them, reviews that I've done for some already, reviews that I will do for others in the future. A lot of games, and I'm continuing this challenge most of the way through May already. I consistently am like a month ahead. I can't get further ahead, which I'd love to because I'd like to knock some more games off my list over here. But I'm knocking off plenty, and I continuously am trying to stay ahead of the curve. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.